On this episode of This Week in Space, we're talking about the recent successes of Starliner and Starship. Stay with us.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is This Week in Space, episode number 114, recorded on June 7th, 2024. Starliners and Starships. Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Space, the Starliners and Starships edition. I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Ad Astra Magazine, and I'm here as always with, drumroll please, Tarek Malik.
Hello, Rod.
The ineffable editor-in-chief of Space.com. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I got my Starship t-shirt on just in honor of this episode, too. Largely because I can't wear the Starliner one and the Starship one at the same time. I'm doing great.
Well, we wouldn't have known that if you hadn't told us. So I guess that's good. Before we start, I want to remind all you dear listeners to please be good to us and make sure to like and subscribe and all the other optional things you can do to indicate to us that you love the podcast. And more importantly, to indicate to the world and the advertisers that you love the podcast, because we care about you and we need to know you care about us. And to make sure you care about us, we have a space joke, an episode-specific space joke from Bill Schreier.
All right,
are you ready, my friend?
Yes. Lay it on me, Bill.
Actually, it's a three-parter, and there's no call and repeat here. And I see him. What's the difference between Starlink and a Starling?
I do not know. What is the difference?
First, Starlings can take off and fly whenever they want to. Then he added later, due to more recent news, well, Starlings fly on the first try, not the fifth. And Starlings don't have helium leaks or flammable wiring delays. They're delaying their takeoffs.
That's very specific. Very specific.
But I thought it was pretty good. So thank you, Bill. And pardon my lousy delivery. My mouth's a little numb today from some dental stuff, so I'm talking with my tongue on my face. All right, everyone, save the cosmos from Tarek's bad jokes.
Did you lose your wisdom teeth? Is that what that was, or just your wisdom?
We'll talk later. But I did like that joke, so we were saved this week by an intelligent listener, thank God. But be sure to send us your best, worst, and most different space jokes to twist@TwitTV, because we basically want to use your work for free. All right. Let's do some headlines.
Yes.
We live for headlines.
It's a busy week this week. Busy week.
So tell us all about the triumph of Chang'e 6.
Yeah.
Which I was tutored on pronouncing. It's not Chang'e, as I have been saying. It's Chang'e.
Chang'e. That's right.
Chang'e.
So, this one comes from Space News. I think is it Andrew Jones over there? He knows his stuff. And of course, we've talked about China. Actually, we had a whole episode about China's moon project just before their landing. And they made no bones about it. Just days after reaching the moon, they collected something like up to 2,000 grams of like far side moon sample material, and they launched it off the far side of the moon basically the day after you and I talked. Right? Yeah. and it has since actually met up with the I believe it's met up with the ascent vehicle. What is it? The collector, the returner,
the Earth return vehicle,
the Earth return vehicle, because the ascender, got into orbit just fine, and it's going to be heading back in near. So it seems like they had a fantastic mission, and this was very interesting because a lot of people have been writing about it.
Prove it.
Well, except Space.com, we didn't. But China built a flag that you can raise on the lander, and so they basically used like a what is it, like a almost like a robotic arm type thing that opened up and deployed the flag. So instead of just having a flag on like on the side of the spacecraft, and in fact in the photo of the story that you can see it right there, just underneath the arm on the left side for folks that are watching on YouTube. It's this little Chinese national flag that popped out on its own little arm and was raised, and it's the first time they've ever actually physically raised a flag on the moon.
Flag. It's kind of like a dollhouse flag.
And you might be asking, well,
why would you bother?
Well, how did they take this picture, right? That they had, and it's because they had this tiny little rover that was like a camera rover that was hitched right on the side of the lander, and it just popped off and drove a little bit away, and then took this picture. So very smooth sample return mission, very fast sample return mission, and actually, this is the type of mission that Dean Chang that we spoke about in our recent China-centric episode mentioned. I mean, this was a mission that didn't do much else. It landed, scooped up some samples, put them in the ascender, launched it off the moon, got it to the return vehicle, and eventually they'll make it way back to Earth. Very, very bare bones, very fast and clean. Not trying to get dozens of samples from all these different places and stuff like that. So big success here.
And annoyingly, it looks like it's very different to do it further away and over a longer period of time, and with different gravity. But these are the steps you need for Mars sample return that we're struggling with. And yeah, I think there's a good chance they'll be bringing it back first. I guess we'll see.
We'll have to see.
Yeah. Okay. And now on to the Hubble Space Telescope in its, how many years has it been now?
35, 34,
yeah.
34 years.
Yeah. So almost 4 decades. We've had multiple servicing missions when we had a space shuttle. And one of the things they did, besides fixing the optics in the beginning of lab, was replace the gyros as they went out, because big, heavy spacecraft needs moderately large, heavy gyros to reposition it for different mission objectives. And one by one, they're given out. So we have 3 left now?
Well, gyros. No, they're on one now. So they've got
they're using one, but they have more than one operating. They still have a backup.
Well, they've got one. I think they only got one backup run. That's the whole issue, They're trying to extend the life of the Hubble Space Telescope, and we actually, I think I have mentioned this a couple of times in recent months, where they've gone into safe mode at least twice in the last year, like 12-month period, because of these gyro issues. And gyros have always been a problem. Instead of using thrusters to orient itself, it uses these big gyros that spin, and then they can point it really accurately. And what they're deciding to do now is to just shift and kind of bite the bullet and say, it's old and it can't use these gyroscopes as well. They keep failing, so we're only going to use one. It's going to limit a little bit of the science that they can do. They won't be as accurate, etc. And they're trading that off for a few extra years of life. And I believe they're hoping that this is going to keep it going through about 2035, which is great, I suppose. The frustrating part is that if they had a servicing mission go up there, they could get like another 20 years out of it. I think they wanted more, back in 2000 and was it 9? They hope to get to 2015, maybe 2020, if memory serves. And here we are in 2024. And that was that last Hubble servicing mission with the space shuttle. I should note that billionaire Jared Isaacman, financier of private SpaceX flights into orbit, has offered to cover the cost of an actual private servicing mission. But after a study into it, NASA said no. I think there was maybe a few too many unchecked boxes that they weren't comfortable with about how they would get there, who the crew would be, how would they be able to be trained on it, what if something goes wrong, who's responsible for it, that sort of thing. So they said no to that, and that's kind of it. No more servicing plans unless there's something new that comes up that NASA comes up with for it. So this is what we get until maybe 2035, and hopefully they don't have more safe mode issues from these gyroscopes, because you're right, they have 2 functioning ones out of 6. Rod, you were asking earlier. So.
Okay, I thought they had 3, but yeah, they are cutting down.
They did until like 2 years ago when one of them failed.
Right. Well, but I was looking more recently than 2 years ago, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which would be sad. You know, we talked about the Isaacman thing a couple of weeks ago. I mean, it's a great idea. It's a generous idea of him. As you know, I've referred to him as Space Jesus before. He's very good about these things. But, you know, it's funny. So from Isaacman's and perhaps SpaceX's side, it feels, from what we know anyway, like they presented a pretty logical vision of how this could work. But knowing as you do about how long it takes NASA to prepare to do these things in the way NASA does, which is astronauts in the neutral buoyancy tank for months and months and months training, and the fact that the Dragon has never flown anywhere near as high as this before, because Hubble is in a very high orbit. I don't know the exact mileage anymore, but it used to be like right at the edge of the shuttle's operating range.
Yeah.
I think it was close to 400 miles.
It was very close to 400 miles. Yeah, it was like 350, 375.
And then not having docked with anything before, they did put that common docking mechanism in the back of it in their last servicing mission. But I could see where they'd be concerned about there being lots of problems. And of course, as somebody I quoted when we were talking about it before said, it would really, and I'm paraphrasing, it would really suck to have a couple of dead astronauts hanging on there because of something that went wrong. I can't imagine what it would be. But one thing is the Dragon doesn't have an airlock. Anyway, it's a longer story than we're able to present here, but there are reasons not to. Let's put it that way.
There are, you know, and if you think about just that last servicing mission alone, I think we touched on this when we spoke about it before, but there were things that went wrong that could have ended that whole mission. I think the wide field camera door initially didn't open, and if they couldn't get that camera out, then they couldn't put the new one in, and that was a mission critical milestone. There was a handrail that was in the way of a repair that Mike Massimino had to physically rip off, and there was like a whole Tiger team in the back trying to figure out how to do that while he was out there on that spacewalk. And then, you know, given like what you just said, a private mission would be likely much simpler. It would probably just dock, boost, and then undock, right? But it seems very straightforward, you know, to do something like that. But you know, it's not something that SpaceX has never done before. It's something that NASA has never done before. What if they dock it and then both vehicles are tumbling? We don't know. Well,
and when you say done before, you know, one thing that I don't think SpaceX has ever done is dock with something that's inert and doesn't have control on the far side. So in this case, you know, what if they couldn't disengage? I mean, there's all kinds of things that come to mind that are scary.
And the astronauts on those servicing missions have much more intrinsic knowledge than what they just trained for that mission. So they have a baseline of professional skills.
Because astronauts are awesome.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. One day I'll be an astronaut, Rod, and I will also be awesome. But
well, I'm old enough to remember on the back cover of comic books an ad that says, "Be astronaut tough," and it had Charles Atlas all bent over like that, holding up his muscly forearm. All right. So this is a story I wrote Pascal Lee about it. He hasn't responded yet. I assume he's seen it, but I was hoping to get a comment. The headline from space.com was "New Hole on Mars." That's not, you know, that's not as clickbaity as I'm used to from you. So shame on you.
It doesn't say new. It says the hole on Mars.
The hole on Mars. Okay. I said new hole on Mars. It's actually not clickbaity. It's kind of twisted, but apparent lava pit or tube on the flanks of Arsia Mons, a large volcano on Mars, not the recently discovered one. But it's intriguing because this is something that people like Pascal and others have been looking at a lot.
Yeah.
As places, to perhaps put people when they arrive there so that they're not being saturated by radiation day to day. Of course, this is eventually what you're able to build some infrastructure in there. But two, also, especially on the flank of a volcano, it may still be warm there. We don't know. But there may be some residual warmth, and that would be a very promising place for life, but not as we know it.
Yeah. This is a fun one. I'll tell you, there's a little backstory behind this. The headline for this one, because you know this photo was taken by NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. It has this high-rise, super high resolution camera on it, and what the University of Arizona does, which kind of oversees this instrument MRO is that they every now and then, I think every week or every day or so, they post a new image. And a couple weeks ago, like at the end of May, they put this hole on Mars picture out. Not particularly a brand new photo, but that was when they put it out, and it just grabbed like everyone out there, like all the remote like non-space publications just like glammed on it because how creepy this giant like lava tube hole looks. And
I've seen creepier things in my mirror in the morning, if you say so.
well, I think you should consult a physician. But for this one, I was a little, I don't know if I want to say the word annoyed. I was just like, you keep seeing the hole on Mars, and it's a pit crater. Like we know that's what it is.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, let's look at the science of it and see like why people are excited about it. And that's kind of how we got to where we were. Now, as you mentioned, Pascal Elias has mentioned in the past about these craters and these caves on Mars being potential places, not only from where we could find extremophile life or evidence of it, because it's covered, it's protected, it's shielded from the harsh radiation and other environments, but also they've talked about turning these into possible habitats. It's a lot easier to line one of these caves with one entrance and put an airlock on it than it is to build a whole thing from scratch, and that is kind of the interesting thing, and promise for what this means. So this crater, let's see, I think it's about MRO was about 159 miles above the planet when it took it. But as I mentioned, not a new photo. It's from August 2022, and they just chose. They chose to do it now.
And there were other ones from many years prior. I mean, this is something you've been able to see for a long time. I think what made this one kind of unique, not totally unique, but a bit unique, was that during the right lighting conditions, you can see the floor. So you can get an idea of the depth of it, and you can see the rubble in the bottom and so forth. It still doesn't tell you whether or not it's airtight, however, which is a concern, because if it's not, then you can still put habitats down there. They just have to be self-contained. It's not like you could just go spray saran wrap on the inside and say, okay, we're sealed. But they're intriguing all the way around, especially from the life sciences side of things, right? Yeah.
I'd like to just stand on the rim of that thing and throw some rocks down. Wouldn't that be fun, Rod? I mean, I'm sure the scientists would be like mortified, but how fun would that be?
Well, especially with all the bacteria on your hand from your spacesuit, fouling up their life science things. By the way, all these are from space.com. I should have mentioned that up top.
Oh, you did. Thank you.
And for our last story, as you put it, a new star could appear in the sky any night now. Here's how to see the blaze star ignite, and you should have added by trying this one weird trick, a secret they don't want you to know or something.
This is from Live Science, our sister publication. Yeah. And we actually had written about this too, but there's a star called T Corona Borealis. And astronomers suspect that sometime between now and the end of the summer, so between now and like September, the star could go nova, right? So that it could erupt and be, as Tycho Brahe called it, a new star in the sky that we could see with our own unaided eye. And it would be the first one since like 1946. This dim star 3,000 light years away would be visible for us, and so that would be really interesting. Now, I've never seen like a brand new star brighten to the point that we can see it like this, because like right now it is a magnitude +10. Magnitude is a scale that astronomers use to describe like the brightness of objects, and the brighter an object is, the lower its magnitude number is. So +10 is not bright. In fact, that's too dim for us to see with our unaided eye, which can usually see something like magnitude 4 to 6 or so. And they think that this could actually get up to a magnitude 2, which is great, because that is something that would be about the same brightness as Polaris, the North Star, which is the 48th brightest star in the sky. So this would be something just to keep an eye on over the summer. It's also called the Northern Crown, and it's between the constellations Boots, or I think it's Boots. It has like the two.
Bootes.
Bootes. I'm so
don't go there. Don't go there.
And the constellation Hercules in the night sky is where you'll be able to find it.
Because Hercules has Bootes. All right.
So keep
interesting.
it'll be fun. It'll be fun to see how it develops over the summer.
Of course, if you live where I do, you can't see any star that isn't a supernova within 2 light years anyway, but that's my problem. And finally, before we go to our break, I would like to congratulate, I talked the other week about Abigail Sparger and her father, who I met at the ISTC, and she interviewed me and asked a bunch of questions, and they were very intelligent questions. We had a nice talk. And I just got an email the other day that interview resulted in a report that she did for school. And are you ready for this? Are you sitting down, my friend?
I'm sitting. Yes, I'm ready.
She got a 200 out of 200.
Nice.
Now, I can't take credit for that, nor do I want to, but I have to say, when I read those kinds of emails, which are fairly rare, I get a little something in my eye, you know? So that was very nice to hear. So congratulations, Abigail. And congratulations to your dad for being a better dad than either of us. All right. Oh, see how I wrapped into that? Okay.
I say, yeah. Well, I resemble that remark, I suppose. So
let's run to a quick break and we'll be right back. So, my friend.
Yes.
It's the day of days, and I'm not referring to the anniversary of D-Day, although we do acknowledge that. But hold on, let me get my breath. Starliner worked.
That's right.
Now I can't even remember. Did we ever have a bet on this
to be able to say that?
I don't think I bet you for your chair on Starliner because it was so uncertain. But we had a successful launch.
Yes,
we had a successful rendezvous and docking with the space station.
A few glitches, but yeah.
After some issues with thrusters, which may be related to software, and I haven't read for certain that it wasn't valves. And I just, we'll
talk about that. We'll talk about that because it was an interesting evening press conference last night talking about the thrusters themselves, etc. So we'll talk about it. So.
Okay. Well, so Starliner worked. We're all, cheers to Boeing. They certainly have succeeded in not making it look easy, but it did work. And the astronauts are up, Butch and Sunita up there, and they're safe. And cheers to Boeing and ULA for having achieved this. So this was on Wednesday morning.
Yeah, Wednesday, June 5th. June 5th.
And then they dragged their heels for 24 hours and finally rendezvous and docked on Thursday. And, I guess we could say that the caution, which at this point would be, I say caution, delays, whatever you want to say, about 8 years past their first projected flight date, I think, which is a long time when you got a contract like that. But if that's what it takes to do it safely, it's worth it. And
I think there's cause for first. Let's talk about the launch itself because there's some things I wanted to bring up. First of all, I almost said SpaceX. First of all, Starliner launched on an Atlas V rocket, Boeing Starliner. It's the first time, and they launched from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station,
which is weird. Yeah,
Launch Complex 41. It's the first time in about 60 years that astronauts have launched from the Space Force Station, previously the Air Force Station, and it's the first time in many different vehicle programs that an astronaut has launched on an Atlas V rocket as well.
So if I may interject for people who haven't been to the Kennedy Space Center, we're always used to seeing the crewed vehicles, rockets, shuttle, Saturn V's, and now Falcon 9s, leaving from pad 39, either 39A or 39B historically. And that's kind of, I guess, what you'd say, it's just slightly southeast of the vehicle assembly building. Cape Canaveral it used to be Canaveral Air Force Base, and now I guess it's a Space Force base. Yeah, is further south from there, and that's the one you see in the aerial photo sometimes with like a whole row of launch gantries, right? Yeah, and that was always for unmanned rockets.
Uncrewed, Rob. Uncrewed.
Oh my God! As an editor, I bust people for that all the time. I can't believe I just said that. Uncrewed or non-human spaceflight. Thank you. So this was kind of a one-off. And then the Atlas, people argue, well, we've launched people on Atlas rockets, missiles at the time before, but that was the old Atlas. That was the thin-skinned stainless steel Atlas that launched John Glenn and the others on the Mercury flights when they got off the Redstone, but never on the Atlas V, which has no relationship to the original Atlas except a name and a company.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of space history and potentially a harbinger of things to come, because Cape Canaveral Space Force Station is also home to SpaceX launch pads, and they are upgrading their own pad there to be able to accommodate crewed flights as well. So what we saw with this first Boeing Starliner flight is something we could see a lot more of in the future with these private companies launching from the Space Force Station. So that was pretty exciting to say the least. A very smooth countdown on this last time, which was interesting. Not too much to write home about. The only kind of annoying part, and we could talk about this later too, but once they launched the thing, once they launched into space, that was it. We didn't see Sonny Williams or Butch Wilmore inside the spacecraft on the way up.
Or the weightlessness stuffed animal or whatever they were going to do, right? Exactly.
And that's something that persisted for the entire 26 hours of their flight to the space station. So that was fairly annoying. And it seems like it may have been a choice, like an oversight made by choice to not do that, because Mark Nappy, Boeing's Starliner program manager, says, well, they're looking into the ability to provide live in-cabin video. They can't do it for some reason or another on this flight, as well as the next 2 flights they said it could take, which I find very weird, because Apollo missions broadcast live television from the moon, in the late 60s and 70s. So you would think that they could figure something out, but
well, having had a series of British sports cars when I was a younger man with electronics by Lucas, which anybody who's ever owned an old British sports car knows the appellation, the Prince of Darkness, was well reserved for Lucas. I'm convinced that somehow, you know where I'm going, Boeing was working with some supplier that just couldn't get their valves right. But why that would affect video is an interesting question. I don't know.
But aside from that, I mean, it was a very good launch. It seems like a lot of the issues on the Atlas V side with the United Launch Alliance, the issues with the computer card that thwarted the earlier attempt, they got a lot of that stuff kind of squared away for this try, right. And it was all set to go. So now we're in this test phase. There were should we talk about the issues, because there were issues. And we could talk a bit about them too.
Yeah, let's do that. But first, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. And your handsome face can flap its gums some more about the issues, because all you do is complain. I swear. We will be right back. All right. Hit me, my man. Hit me.
All right, so good launch finally on June 5th. Of course, they had delays in May and in again on the 1st. A good approach. Later that I think they went to the astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sun. Oh, by the way, I didn't say Sunny Williams is now the first female astronaut ever to fly as a test pilot on a spacecraft. So that's another historic moment too.
Wait a minute. On something other than the shuttle, you mean?
No, she's the first female astronaut to be the first to fly on a new vehicle. Does that make sense? The first. Wait, hold on. To fly on a test flight of a brand new.
Oh, I see.
Spacecraft.
Okay.
So she's the first woman to do it. So again, big congrats. Also, she was the first person to run a marathon in space. She ran the Boston Marathon when she was on the space station during a previous increment.
On Stephen Colbert's face.
By the way, both Sunny and Butch are veteran space station astronauts. So this is a homecoming of sorts for them.
Yeah.
So we've got the launch, we've got the ascent, and then as the crew is getting ready for bed that first night, there is a call from ground control. They have detected not one, but 2 new helium leaks in the propulsion system, very similar to the one that they knew that they already had before launch, and that they said that they could deal with it. So it's very frustrating. They have to figure out what to do, because they need to have a supply of helium to
come home.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
They need like 96 hours worth of helium. To achieve the mission. And so they budget for that. And And what they ended up doing was turning off the manifolds that helium goes into, so that way the helium can't even get to where it's leaking out of. And they did that overnight, and then they turned them back on docking day, which was Thursday, June 6th, as we're recording, when the astronauts would need to use the thrusters. So that way they can conserve the helium itself. And then when they dock to the space station, they turn off the manifolds again, and then they can turn them back on when it's time to come home. And Mark Nabby said, like, at the end of it, that they've got something up between 135 and 175 hours of this helium supply left now. So they've got like plenty of it. They don't have to worry about these leaks ever again. It's going to take something like 12-ish hours, 16 hours, something like that, just to get home. So they don't have to worry about like the double days it took to get there. And so that's one thing. But they just want to understand why these leaks keep happening. Because one leak on the ground is one thing. 2 leaks is another. And then after they docked, they found a 4th leak, Rod. A 4th leak of this helium in the system. So they're suspecting there could be some kind of common cause that they didn't think of on the ground that is happening in space that they can try to pin down. And they're going to look at that when they get the capsule back after the end of the mission itself. So that was one thing. And in fact, it was of an issue so much that Butch Wilmore asked first thing in the morning, "What's the deal with the helium leak?" And that's when they kind of outlined their plan about turning off the manifolds when they don't need them, turning them on when they do need them, and then they can work it through it that way. But during dock operations, they lost 5 aft thrusters on the service module, and this is, if this sounds similar, it happened during OFT2. They lost a series of thrusters, and they had to turn them off, turn them back on again, and try to isolate it. And then they ended up working the rest of the flight. So NASA and Boeing both, they don't understand. Steve Stitch said, they can't figure out why this is happening. They want to understand it, but it doesn't seem to be a problem in the thrusters themselves. Boeing says that there may be something in the settings, basically the software governing this whole reaction control system, that they haven't, that it uses a different software set between orbital insertion and the rendezvous up, something that happens in that phasing that is affecting these thrusters. And then the system says these have failed to off. The thrusters themselves work, but the system says, I don't like the way that these are set up. I'm going to fail them to off and turn them off. And then Boeing has to test them each. And what it did, it was a delayed docking by like an hour, at least an hour. It could have been worse, but Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams, they had to do some kind of fancy free flying to test each of the thrusters individually to make sure that they worked. They were able to recover 4 of the 5, and the 5th one they just turned off for the rest of the mission before they could do it. They even put the Starliner in free drift for a while, so just floating around off, a couple of hundred meters off the port of the bow of the space station while they figured it all out. And then he was able to fly it in for the docking. So, and that went smoothly. But those are the 2 kind of core issues. The cooling system used more water than they had expected, but future Starliners, they said, are going to have a bigger water tank. They use a sublimator that creates a block of ice that then sublimates to make the cooling, and they just burn through the water, I guess, the block of ice faster than they thought. So those are the 3 kind of big things that happened. And NASA and Boeing, they don't seem too worried about them.
I thought about Starliner and Boeing this morning as I was heating up my breakfast, because I was standing in front of my stove thinking, wow, look at that. It's a gas stove. And I thought, look at how the valves work. I can turn them on, I could turn them off, and when they're off, nothing leaks that I can tell. What an amazing accomplishment in the industrial age. But there you go. Apparently, it's
your valves could leak. Who knows, right?
It hasn't blown up my kitchen yet. But
I will tell you, I understand that in space, the margins of what is an acceptable leak are much smaller than they are here on the ground. But if I have to hear how small a molecule, helium is, or that kind of thing, again.
and I know this is being done a bit on a budget, but when you look back in the Apollo years, so for instance, and this is unrelated, but I remember reading somewhere that if you put liquid oxygen in one of the liquid oxygen tanks, like the one that blew up on Apollo 13. They were so well engineered and insulated that it would stay in a liquid form for years, many years, because they knew how to make stuff work. And, I don't want to belittle Boeing. Well, I guess I kind of seem like I do, but it's just, it's a head scratcher to me. And I wonder, to this day, if both part of the big emphasis, we hear, it feels like we hear more direct reporting from Boeing than we might from SpaceX. But we're also seeing more caution. And I wonder if part of that is because of their history as a cost plus contractor with NASA and the fact they're a publicly owned company with, shareholders and they're listed on the stock exchange and all that, if these things all make a difference. But it's like, guys, you've been building airplanes for a century. You've been building parts of spacecraft since before the Apollo program. You kind of ought to be able to know how to do this, but by the same token, you could say, you should be able to build planes that don't have troubles flying. So I guess it's just a company that's endured a lot of changes. And certainly something has changed in the last 10 to 15 years. I know a lot of people pin it back to, moving the headquarters away from Seattle and all that. Who knows? I mean, there's all kinds of Monday morning quarterbacking going on.
And you see the difficulties on the aviation side too, that they've been having that,
really?
As well.
Yeah, that was kind of embarrassing. So some more things that are fascinating about Starliner, just for basic comparisons, it's larger than the old Apollo space capsule or the Crew Dragon. And I just mean larger in terms of pressurized cubic feet. It can hold 7 people, as I think Crew Dragon can too in a pinch, right? They just never configured it that way.
In the contract, they were required to design 2 up to 7 people.
Yeah,
in terms,
which is a tight. If you've ever been in either of those, I haven't been in Starliner, but I've been inside the Crew Dragon, and would be pretty tight. I mean, you'd basically be butts to faces if you were set up that way. Is smaller than Orion, but not by a whole lot. And cost is interesting. So we wanted all this to cost less than we were paying Russia to go up on Soyuz, right? Because Soyuz got expensive. It started somewhere south of $50 million per seat. I think it was 36 or 40 million. And by the time we weren't buying any more tickets to ride on their funky old spacecraft, they were edging up into the mid 80 million mark.
Oh, 90.
90s?
Yeah.
Because we just got some more, right?
Yeah, it's in the 90s now for that flight. So
and here we are with SpaceX and Boeing providing rides up to the space station, which is great. It's good to have 2 operators in case something happens to one, and they'll compete. But how competitive are they? So Boeing got $4.6 billion when all this started, and SpaceX got Boeing got 4.2. 4.2 and SpaceX got 2.6 billion. So SpaceX was cheaper there. There were some additional amounts in between, but SpaceX still got a lot less money than Boeing did. And then Boeing turns around and says, hey, ignore what's over there. It's going to end up costing 90 million per seat, at least per seat, according at least to the NASA Inspector General, whereas SpaceX is charging 55 million without discounts. So, that puts Soyuz well north of SpaceX and possibly about the same or slightly south of Starliner, depending on what kind of deal they had. And tellingly, in 2015, when all this was just starting out, they got dropped. Probably were happy to be dropped, but it got dropped from the commercial resupply contract.
Yeah, I mean they're focusing on just flying out this contract, as well.
Yeah.
Something interesting came up in the post-docking press conference last night as well, and it was this comparison. There's a lot of comparisons between Boeing, Starliner, and other vehicles. Oh, and of course, everyone wants to point to SpaceX. Look at SpaceX. SpaceX has launched 8 missions already. They don't have as many glitches. What's the big deal there? Why is it? Why is it so different? And a question was asked, and I think it was Lauren Grush at Bloomberg, who said, what should we all take about this? Because we're all seeing these glitches that keep happening despite all of the successes, and how does that compare? And Steve Stitch reminded everybody and I think we've talked about this a little bit in past shows, that if you're going to compare something like Starliner directly to Dragon, you have to acknowledge that SpaceX was already flying an uncrewed version of Dragon that they had already built and designed through like Space Act agreements with NASA with
Right.
plans to scale it up. And Boeing was starting from scratch to build a brand new vehicle. And in that sense, Steve Stitch compared it to Columbia and STS-1 and that first, those first flights and how tricky those were. I mean, you had tiles that fell off the space shuttle with John Young and Bob Crippen watching them float away.
Okay, but can I interject something here? So I take his point, and I know you're not necessarily advocating that point. This does sound a bit mealy-mouthed to me, and not bashing anybody at NASA because they have to do what they have to do, and they have to say what they have to say, and they're a political animal. But it's it's a little bit like watching the Chinese, or in the case of the space shuttle with Buran, the Russians. As we learned from some of the things the Russians did, they certainly learned, quote unquote, or borrowed certain things from the shuttle, like the design when they did Buran. It's not like this is the first time for any of these things. The only thing that's different in primary terms is that Starliner is hopefully going to be reusable, maybe, possibly. It won't have a reusable rocket until after the sixth flight, if there is a post-sixth flight. But it's not like this stuff is black magic. It's been done before. Boeing's done a lot of it before. And again, let me say, Boeing, Shuttle, Apollo, the work they did for DARPA. I could go on and on. As you can see, I'm getting worked up about this, but it's like, I've never seen a company in the space trade anyway make something that they've done before look so hard. We'll have more to say about this, and then we'll get on to Starship, because that's the other big excitement for the week. But first, let's take this short break. Okay, I'm done hyperventilating. But wait, there's more. So I mentioned reusability. So SpaceX's capsules are reusable, which is good. It's the first time that's been done with something other than the shuttle. And Starliner is supposed to be. However, they don't have a reusable rocket yet. They're using the Atlas V. They plan to fly that out. And they've got just enough to finish that. And there are other commitments on the Atlas, which, let's remember, uses Russian rocket engines, which so the American Congress is not a good thing. So they bought enough to fly out this manifest and the other flights they've committed to. And then we go on to Vulcan, and we're still waiting to see if that's going to be partially reusable or not. Have they moved past we're going to drop the engines and catch them in midair phase yet? Do you know?
Well, the last when I spoke to Yule about it, I mean, they said that was a further down the line thing to pursue. So like not in the first. They're also going to build a new generation of SRBs too that are going to be a lot cheaper and a lot lighter as well. Is that going to go back to the composite design the Air Force was experimenting with, or just thinner? Yeah, it's like a spun up composite version. Yeah.
Finally, good, because they had already spent the money on that.
Yeah. Yeah, but they said that they can fly. They think they can fly these Starliners up to 10 times is what they're hoping to shoot for. And in fact, there's a black streak on the side of the capsule that's up there now. By the way, the capsule has a name. Its name is Calypso. That was chosen by Sunita Williams, and also her zero-G indicator is also called Calypso, and it is a super sparkly
Oh, you mean the one we didn't see because there was no video?
Well, you should go to Collect Space because Robert Perlman has a whole story all about it. So.
Robert Perlman, who we've had on the show.
Before, yeah.
All right. Well, there's more to say there, but I don't want to shortchange SpaceX because what a marvelous flight yesterday. Oh, yes. Just really
quickly, there's one thing we didn't talk about, and that's on line 43, John. If you see it, I just added it there really quickly because I did want to mention this, and this is the spacesuits.
Oh, those cool. Which came, they look just like the ones from the manned orbiting laboratory program in the mid 60s.
And so online 43, there's a link there that for reference if anyone wants to see it. But Boeing they have these Boeing blue spacesuits that they worked with a contractor, and I think it's Collins.
Collins Aerospace, wasn't
I
it?
thought it was something else. Anyway, the reason I bring it up is because it's Boeing, and so it's the classic Boeing blue, and they only weigh 10 pounds, and they have like a zip up helmet, much like not the Orlons, the Sokol suits, right? That
The Russian ones,
Russia uses, that have that zip up helmet too, that's attached to the actual suit. Sunny Williams said that this was like one of the most comfortable things that she's ever worn on a launch. That it was really flexible. It was really easy to move around in. It looks very futuristic for people that are listening. It's a blue and gray suit with a lot of black trim that kind of looks like a mix between a motorcycle full body suit and a fight, like what is it? Like a flight suit, but also with like spacey rings on it, and this kind of bubble shield helmet that pops down. And they really had a lot to say about it. They actually called the suits their 2 extra crewmates on the mission that they, after they took them off when they got into space for it. And there's a great big zipper up the back that they have. That's how they get into it. So it's pretty cool.
And they're a little less Power Rangers looking than the ones that SpaceX uses. Although I kind of like the ones that SpaceX came out with just because they were. I know they're utilitarian, but they're fun looking.
Yeah, and they have that sci-fi helmet that you clip on.
Yeah. They there's a little bit of Captain Marvel there, but
these ones have nice boots. And in fact, the astronauts, both Sunny and Butch, wore them when they like entered the space station in their actual NASA flight suits, like those blue iconic ones. And I just thought it was really rude of house guests to enter a house with your shoes on. It's like the one thing that we ask everyone for us.
So let's talk about Starship.
Let's talk about Starship.
The 4th test flight yesterday, which was a real stand up and cheer moment. Now, we're switching gears here from a crew capable long duration spacecraft to something that's still flying without, as far as I know, a fully outfitted crew cabin, certainly no life support. It's just kind of a big stainless steel shell at this point, but they reached most of their goals.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It
was a really impressive test flight.
All of their goals. I would say they we've got video for the YouTube folks here. SpaceX, again, Starship is the world's most powerful rocket. It's 400 feet tall. And SpaceX had not until this test flight managed to get either the Starship vehicle or its super heavy booster back to Earth at all. Like each time, either it blew up during ascent, or they commanded it to auto destruct, or as in the case on the most recent flight in March 2024, it broke apart. They broke apart on reentry. And very interestingly, during this launch, SpaceX actually admitted that on that flight 3, that the Starship was rolling uncontrollably because the RCS, the reaction control system, failed due to a likely blockage. This flight seemed perfect. It launched at a little bit later than almost an hour into the window that SpaceX had for it, but they had a clean separation. They had that hot fire staging. The super heavy booster had live video coming all the way back down to Earth where it did its landing burn, and then you can see it in the video, hit the ground, hit the water. Here's the moment. It hits the water and then it just topples over, and then the camera feed goes black. And the sound from SpaceX was tremendous. They were cheering and they were screaming, and that was great. Meanwhile, the Starship itself kept going all the way through about a 65-minute flight to attempt another reentry, and that was something that it didn't manage to do on the most recent flight. And there is a scene near the end of the video where I have not seen any as gripping a view of an aerospace flap in the history of my space career. It is this one video view of a flap on the Starship vehicle, and you're watching the heat of reentry burn away the tiles and the cladding around this flap. It's getting hot. Pieces are breaking away. The camera screen goes dark, and all of the people at SpaceX are like, "Oh no!" And then it comes back again, and they cheer because the camera's still there, which means the spacecraft is still there.
But the lens is cracked,
and then the lens cracks, and then they lose the signal again, and then it comes back again, and then they cross the 65-kilometer altitude level, which is about as far as they made it on the last flight, and it keeps going down as it was expected, and then there was a moment where I actually audibly gasped and like laughed to myself. You know, I laugh when I get excited.
We remember that from the last Starship test you were at.
That's right. Because, and you can see it. Yeah, you can see it here a bit because in the video feed, there's a little icon of Starship on the bottom of SpaceX's screen. And for most of reentry, it is in a little pitch, to have that nice aerodynamic approach on the way down. And then you just see it very quickly flip all the way around and do the landing burn and then turn again to be upright. And that was the telemetry that we saw for the big flip that they do for the landing. And it seems to have worked. Now, we no one was out there in the Indian Ocean looking for it, trying to watch it come down. So we don't know how much of the spacecraft actually was there. We know that at least one of the flaps was burnt to a crisp, and the SpaceX even made jokes later about it, which I think you want to touch on. But it was absolutely phenomenal that they made it all the way through. And so, I mean, arguably, Starship is a sexy rocket. It's giant. It's stainless steel. Clearly a hardy rocket to withstand so much burn through and still manage to make it. But you can't look away at those launches. And this one did not disappoint. Part of me still wonders, Rod, how much more is left to go. Because this was just like a bunch of steel and fuel tanks and rocket engines, right? And of course, all the brains to do all of that accurate steering. But if you're going to fly people to the moon, you need so much more than that. You need so many of it. And I'm wondering how many more of these test flights we have to see before they actually circle the Earth. This was not an orbital flight. Orbital speed, yes. Not an orbital actual flight. They didn't orbit any of that. Yeah.
Let's talk about that after we take our next break. We'll be right back.
And what did you think of it?
Well, I mean, I wasn't tracking it as close as you were because I was working on something else that day. But, it's always kind of an emotional experience because it kind of feels like we're back. And again, as I say often, being a boomer, for me, it's like, oh, finally, we've been waiting since 1972 for something that's actually capable of leaving Earth orbit, we hope. So that's fascinating. Oh, but wait, we have to refuel it somewhere between 7 and 566 times to make it go anywhere else. Different conversation. But it was amazing to watch, as you said, that moment of the moments of burn through were kind of uncanny because we've seen other spacecraft fail, sadly, a couple of space shuttles included, but we've never seen it real time before. Yeah. It's like, oh, look, there's a hole burning through the superstructure. So that was fascinating. I have to say, from a media standpoint, I get a little tired while the screen yelling at SpaceX. I'm excited too. Yeah. But it feels when they pull the camera back, and having been there for some of their events, they kind of grab everybody at the office and front load them down this little area ahead of the cameras. It's like, okay, everybody, cheer, And I think these people are genuinely enthusiastic, but it feels a little programmed. And again, coming from the age of when the NASA announcers and PAOs used to talk like sports people. All right, we have ignition. Apollo 11 has cleared the tower. It's gotten much bouncier. And if you've been monitoring social media since this, there's a lot of grumpy old men my age and many younger actually who are saying, who are these candy drops they have doing the live narration for this? But you know what? It's a new age. Society's changed. We have social media. We have, for God's sake, space.com. Not that I'm accusing you of any of this, but we've got a lot more venues for coverage, and SpaceX and SpaceX's flight and their control rooms, they should be able to do whatever they want. But I wanted to mention, you're saying how much more is there? Let's not forget that I believe this was the year that Yusaku Maezawa was supposed to be circling the moon with 7 or 8 of his closest friends in the Dear Moon flight, which meant, being capable of reaching Earth orbit, leaving Earth orbit into translunar ejection, orbiting the moon, or at least doing a flyby, and then coming home. So that's life support, seats for that many people. You want to make sure it can re-enter because it was supposed to re-enter under its own, wouldn't be transferring astronauts to anything else to come home. So that's a lot of steps away from where they are now. And actually, Rod, he just canceled that.
Yeah, it was supposed to be last year, actually. 2023. Okay. 2023 was when it was supposed to be. Yeah, they actually canceled. Yusaku Maezawa canceled his order of the Starship moon mission on June 1st, the same day as the Starliner first launch attempt. I understand. I mean, he was financing a lot of the early development of this. Well, some. Project. I
mean, I think it was something south of $1 billion, and we don't know if he's getting any of that back.
Yeah, I would expect not. That's water under the bridge, right? Yeah. And I do. My heart does go out for the 8 people, the artists, and the 2 alternates. There was that were selected for that flight. It wasn't something that they had asked for, but it was like a gift that was given to them. Yeah. And now it's been kind of wrenched away. And I guess there's a lesson there to not count your chickens, I guess, before they're fully hatched. But they're understandably really upset, about why you would sign on to something like that, only to find out that a couple of years later, it's down the tube.
So you're telling me you feel bad for your competitor, Tim Dodd?
Well, yeah. Well, the competitor.
Well, that's good of you.
We do different things. I feel bad if someone came up to you and said, "Hey, Rod, you want to come with me on a private trip to space? I'll pay for it, man.
Knowing what I know about this project at the moment, I would be breathing a big sigh of relief right now. So, dodge that bullet. I don't have to be embarrassed and chicken out at the last second. But I get your point.
But I think Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, as well as all of the other musicians and artists and filmmakers that were selected to go, understood that they wouldn't fly until it was ready to go. Right. And in fact, at least a photographer mentioned, because we did a piece, actually just came out today on space.com about the Dear Moon participants, who said, look, if it was just me, I would just wait until it's ready to go. I got no problem waiting. Right. And but so
they're not writing the big checks.
They're not writing the checks. And perhaps, it was time for the next deposit. And Maezawa was like, you know what? I already flew to space. He bought not 1, but 2 tickets to the International Space Station already. Right. Did a whole big video thing about it. Maybe he's like, you know what, that was enough for me. And I'm gonna move on and do other things and just want to finance it. SpaceX, your project is in a good place. You've got NASA contracts to land people on the moon. Thanks.
Well, and by the way, that extends the point of when we're talking about work left to do. All we've talked about so far is getting to orbit and getting the pieces home.
Yes.
Hopefully safely for reuse eventually with people in them. The lunar lander version is a whole different bag of apples. And I also just wanted to mention before we go to that, and we have to take one more break, the commentators for the launch after it was over, as I'm sure you saw, took out their little chrome SpaceX rocket torches and some marshmallows and said, okay, let's celebrate. Well, there's some more Starship coming, with the emphasis on s'mores. And both of them, with both camera angles, started torching their marshmallows, and the 2 young ladies, theirs caught on fire, and they stood there with a big smile on their face holding this burning marshmallow. And I had a lot of conflicting emotions at that moment, right? Because all I could think of were heat shield tiles, space shuttles, things like that. And it's like, that is not your best look for this experimental flight.
You forgot the most important fact. And that's the fact that they toasted their marshmallows with Starship shaped lighters.
I said that. Yeah.
Oh, man, I completely missed it. I spaced out on it because they sell those. SpaceX sells those lighters. You can buy them at SpaceX's. I think they're like $50, $60, something like that. Maybe more. I don't know.
And the flame is where the rocket engines are, which is great. It was just the burning marshmallows felt like a bit of a misstep there.
And they have described their Dragon capsules as toasty Actually, Elon Musk has called them that, as toasty marshmallows. When they come back from space, they do kind of have that look. So, in fact, Kate Tice, the NASA, the SpaceX manager that toasted her marshmallow there, actually had it with some coffee after the end of the launch campaign. She tweeted out a nice photo of it just to give everyone an update on that marshmallow status. And by the way, if you saw some familiar faces, Kate Tice and Jesse Anderson are SpaceX's normal moderators, but Dan Hewitt, a former NASA PAO from Johnson, has been at SpaceX for quite a while now for these launches, and it was really nice to see him on a such a successful flight again too.
How could they pass on having us in that job slot? I mean, really. We'd have such a good time with your laugh and my sarcasm. How could they pass? Well, maybe that's why. I also want to add, so there's a couple more things here, and we do not have any more breaks, so we're going to plow right on through. At the same time as they were getting ready for this, SpaceX had 14 launches in May.
Yeah.
And just before this, they had 2 within a couple days of each other. They've had launches within a day or two of each other.
They've had launches on the same day.
On different coasts. And it's just, think what you will of Elon one way or the other, but it's just astonishing. Many credits to Gwynne Shotwell, of course, and lots of other people at SpaceX. There's thousands of them. But kudos to them for making this, as always planned there, an assembly line operation and making it look easy and routine after all that experimentation, as opposed to, quote, old space, unquote, which has always made, in my opinion here, every flight looks somewhat bespoke and expensive and, space is hard and all that. And here we have SpaceX going, it's not that hard if you plan ahead to make it routine.
And there's a point that I wanted to make because Elon Musk and SpaceX, they've committed a couple things. Number one, we haven't touched on the fact about how much material is lost on these test flights because SpaceX isn't recovering anything right now. Right. On the Super Heavy booster alone, they threw away 33 of their Raptor rocket engines. On Starship, there's 6 of them. There's 3 vacuum level ones, and there's 3.
Can I just point out they make an engine a day?
They make an engine a day. Yeah,
that's a month worth of engines. Big deal.
That's the planning that we're talking about. Yeah. And they have built a new factory in Boca Chica at the Starbase facility. They call it the Star Factory, and they have said that they're hoping to get to a point where they can turn out not an engine a day, Rod, but an entire Starship vehicle a day that they're ramping up.
I'm sorry. Wait a minute.
This is what they said. All right. Now, of course, SpaceX is known for big claims, but they are
like putting together a Camry in 8 seconds or something.
Right. But did you think 5 years ago when Elon said they were going to build a Raptor engine a day and roll it out the plant, that they were going to actually make that rate? And then here they are. You thought that they'd do it.
Having been to Hawthorne, before going to the factory here in Southern California, I wouldn't have said that. But having seen the fact that this was designed to be the GM of rocket making and seeing, you've been there, right?
I have not. So that's the difference between us. You've seen the factory floor. I have not. I haven't had the pleasure of
Well, on the other hand, I've never taken a zero gravity flight. Oh, wait, I was supposed to. But then the executive editor at space.com said, no, let me take that story back. I'll fly that for you. Anyway, no
like
hard feelings there.
A really smart guy, whoever that was. We sent you to the desert that one time, right? To go with Curiosity, right?
Well, when you say you sent me, that implies that I was compensated for the time it took to get out there. So yes, I went in your name, let's put it that way, and then got beaten up on finishing the project. But that's another story.
My point about the pace. We'll talk about that. Of something I owe you a drink,
a chair.
My point is that the commitment is there. Again, the timescales we can't. They will always be longer than claimed.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But if there's anything I have learned, it's that when they say they're going to do something, they will eventually get to it in some form. Maybe it's not an entire Starship, but it's like a shell or something a day. And this pattern that you talked about prepping for the high scale, high rate, is something that we are seeing being emulated by other companies. Rocket Lab is just about ready to launch their 50th mission in just a few years. Relativity Space, founded by a USC alum, Phaidon, has basically built a 3D printing assembly line of rockets before they even had contracts to launch all of those rockets. So there's other companies that are taking this model seriously too, and we could see a big explosion, not in the RUD, rapid unscheduled assembly, but a big ramp up of flight rate, of vehicle rates, of testing and iteration. That this Starship stuff is just the tip of the iceberg.
So this brings you to a question which I tried to answer by looking at the various spy sites that are set up around Starbase, but was unable to get an answer. Do you happen to know how many more are standing by in various forms of readiness for launch? Because there's usually a lineup of somewhere between 3 and 6 more Starships just kind of hanging out there waiting to be used, but not all of them are going to fly.
There's a good many. I haven't looked at the feeds from like South Padre Island and NASA spaceflight. And those guys that have the consistent 24-hour coverage. But what we saw in the video, at least that SpaceX showed, was something on the order of like 3 to 4 Starships just sitting there. There's a whole other building now. They've built like 2 VABs, just that they're just filled with super heavy boosters, and so they've got we've got a nice shot on the YouTube feed of just all of the assembly buildings that they've got for that. And you can see there, just in this shot alone, there's at least 2 freestanding Starships in the back there, and then there's more boosters in each of those tall buildings that just beneath it. And then that long, big, huge thing is the Star Factory part where they're building all of the components for the vehicles themselves.
So where's Mechazilla in this shot?
So it's actually further. It's further down the road. So that road that's just to I believe like on the bottom side. That's where you drive by. There's a big Starship entrance there at the top left of the image. Is like a great big sign that says Starbase that you can take your picture of. A lot of people do. And then you keep going down towards the beach. And then on the right side is where Mechzilla is, where they're building a second pad for that's a second Mechzilla that they want to do. SpaceX wants to have 2 different Starship launch pads here. They're building 2 at the Kennedy Space Center at their complex 39A, and then Elon Musk has said, and this could be that optimistic timeline front, but he did say that Flight 5, which we expect is going to be, so this view, by the way, for the folks on the YouTube, this is the Mechzilla thing. It's about, it's a short drive further towards the beach from the Starbase facility, and you can park literally across the street from the world's tallest rocket and then just sit there for an afternoon and marvel at it. People do. They have cookouts and stuff at the beach on further down the way.
They can burn their marshmallows there. I'm always shocked how close it is to the storage tanks they show on the left there.
I think they've been building more and moving some around, but they hadn't had issues. There was some damage from the first flight on those tanks, and so they had to make adjustments to it.
But that was flying pieces. It wasn't.
It was big chunks of the launch pad. And of course, they haven't had any of those problems since they put that flame deflector in. So
how about that? Well, this is all kind of astonishing. And, for years, I think we've all wanted to be enthusiastic and positive about this. And then the timeline stretched out more and more. Not as long as Starliner, though. So you got to give them that.
I mean, 2016, the Starship was announced. 2019, the first one was shown. And here we are 5 years later. And
it wouldn't seem like a long time if it hadn't been for his projections of, we'll have this out in about 40 minutes. So, he was kind of his own enemy there.
I was saying that he did say at the end of the launch that they could try to catch Super Heavy on the Mechzilla chopsticks with Flight 5, which we think might be later, in the summer or the early fall. So.
Wow. That's going to be something to see if it works.
Yeah.
Of course, they could also wipe out their launch gantry.
I would say don't expect SpaceX to try to catch one until they have the second one built, or at least so close to being built, the second pad so close to being built that it won't interrupt the next test flight. So that's going to be a thing for me. So,
well, God bless them, and let's hope that their next flight comes soon and goes well. And I think they're talking about as soon as the end of June, right?
I mean, I said the end of the summer, but they have said very quickly. In fact, I think
they said June.
Yeah.
Didn't
Well, I'd have to go back. I thought I saw Elon say like a couple of weeks, but that would be before the end of the month. And the launch license for this Flight 4 had
the night before.
Yeah. Well, no. FAA announced it 2 days before. 2 days before. That's the earliest that we've seen it come. And it includes a caveat for 3 different failure modes that SpaceX says, look, this might happen. We're prepped for it. And if those failure modes happen, they don't have to have a whole big FAA investigation into it and then make all these changes because they know what they think is going to fail. And the FAA signed off on it. That might make this next testing regime go a lot faster because we'll see how it goes.
But however, there is a new legal challenge. I think this one's about groundwater contamination or something.
Oh, for Starbase?
Yeah. And, so who was I talking to about this the other day? Somebody was
expanding the site. Yeah, they are.
Well, and somebody was asking me questions about, Orion. Gee, why is it so hard? I think this was at the conference. Why is it so hard for them to make a lunar capable heat shield when they did it a bunch of times during Apollo? And I had to give them that whole story about, look, according to the program manager years ago, it's EPA regulations, and they can't get a waiver to make one stinking heat shield with the materials they used to use because they have environmental implications. And it's like, look, give me the project. I know a couple of borders I can cross. They'll be happy to let me do it there, and then I'll bring it home. No, they can't do that. Well, but I mean, really, this is of national importance, depending on your position on the new space race, quote unquote. It's almost like a wartime footing in some people's minds. It's like, sign a waiver, and do it out near Barstow, my favorite place to malign, because it's hideous out there. The California high desert, it looks like a blast test site. Actually, I've got 5 acres of property up in the Oregon desert that I'll let them use because it looks like somebody dropped a nuclear bomb there because it has nothing but creosote trees and ants. Build your heat shield there. God bless you. You can use sand from my little patch of desert to build your heat shield if you want. But no, and so anyway, getting back to this.
We should go camping there.
We're trying to, oh God, it's such a wasteland. But I got a couple of lots of Colorado that are prettier. I'll just give you one. But getting back to Starship,
I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona. If you want to talk about,
well, it may be soon. But getting back to Starship, this is an out and out race to return to the moon. Both sides acknowledge it handily, and let's let them get on with their operations. And if a certain rare earthworm, and I'm kind of blundering into political territory here, so excuse me. Unless there's something, fundamentally dangerous. Well, there is fundamental danger of it coming back. But unless there's something fundamentally dangerous in the long term, it's not like they're dropping spent nuclear fuel around the launch site or something. So, we may get some email about this, but I just have to say, I just wish that they could kind of get their problems cleared up and get this thing testing as quickly as possible.
It would have been good.
We got dates to make.
It would have been good if they had done all of that work at the beginning when they started building Starbase.
Well, and not told everybody, we'll just fly Falcon 9s out of there. No worries.
They said that's. I know that we're kind of getting long in the time, but SpaceX said they were going to launch Falcon Heavies from
Falcon Heavies, sorry.
Falcon Heavies, and that was it. And then they decided to make a rocket that is like 3 times more powerful or whatever, and so much bigger, and it changes the scale. And now they've scaled it up on a industrial level, and so there are things that do change. I get why the people that have had this nice pristine beach have for many years and decades are a little miffed at this company that comes in and builds this massive complex. And that's a whole other discussion about the value of that to the community at large. But we'll have to see how it all plays out, because the Cape Canaveral is wetlands and marsh and protected areas, and NASA has been there for 60 plus years. So.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like buying a beachfront property across the street from the beach and having somebody come and build a 7-story hotel in front of your place and your view's gone. It's not a good analogy because it's more dangerous than that, but it's an analogy. All right, well, I want to thank everybody from Tarek and myself for joining us today for episode number 114 of This Week in Space, Starliners and Starships. Don't forget to check out space.com, his lovely website where he spends most of his time, and the National Space Society at nss.org. Both are good places to satisfy your spaceflight cravings. And I didn't give the website for space.com because, it's space.com. So, Tarek, where is the best place for us to spy on you and your gaming lifestyle?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Tarek J. Malik, as always, as well as at space.com. And if you do like video game stuff, I am Spacetron Plays on YouTube. And this summer, hopefully, actually this weekend, I hope to get back on the bike. It's had the first bike ride of the summer, and I'm really excited about it. I did want to ask really quick for everyone, we want to know what you thought, too, about Starship. So let us know, and Starliner, let us know in the email. Because we want to start reading email out of the email bag. We get a few every week, but we could get more. So give us something pithy and some jokes, for God's sakes, please. Stop me before I joke again. Remember to, as he commented, please drop us a line, and that is at twit.tv. That's TWIS at twit.tv. Because we welcome your email and we answer your email, and sometimes we even read your email. New episodes of this podcast published every Friday on your favorite podcatcher, as you surely know by now. So make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, and give us thumbs up, 5 stars, 7 rockets, whatever you got. And don't forget, you can get all the great programming with video streams in their complete entirety, along with some stuff you can't see anywhere else on Club Twit for just $7 a month. Tarek, what else can you get that would be a tenth as cool as this show for $7 a month? Absolutely nothing, Rod. Nothing at all.
See? I'd even buy your chair for $7 a month. And you can follow the Twit Tech Podcast Network at Twit on Twitter and on Facebook and twit.tv on Instagram. Thank you, and we'll see you all next week.